Throughout my whole career as a paleontologist, I have never worked on dinosaurs. When I was younger, I grew up obsessed with them. Jurassic Park came out when I was 6, and I must have worn the tape out on the VHS copy that my family had. But as I moved through my academic career, my interest in dinosaurs has kind of subsided. But if you ask me to list my top 5 favourite animals, a type of dinosaur, unbelievably, makes it into the top 5. This dinosaur is special because it is the smallest dinosaur that we know about. And last year, I was lucky enough to see some for the first time. Let me tell you about my adventure to film the smallest dinosaur. The story starts about 2 years ago. I had just finished my PhD and I was starting a new job as a postdoctoral researcher at UCC Cork in Ireland. You may know that some fossils preserve colour. My job was to look at fossil insects to see if we could determine what colour they were by examining their chemistry, and the best way of doing that is by using a mind-blowing machine called a synchrotron. How a synchrotron works is a whole video in itself. Maybe I'll make a video on that soon. But the important thing is that there are only about 40 synchrotrons in the whole world, and the one that we were using is slap bang in the middle of Silicon Valley in California. It's called SLAC, or the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center. At the time, I lived in Ireland, which is known for its tropical climate, so flying to California to use the synchrotron was a really exciting prospect. When I got to California, it was a mad experience. Firstly, we arrived bang in the middle of summer and it was insanely hot. Secondly, I learnt that working on a synchrotron is pretty brutal. The synchrotron never turns off, which means the beam is running 24/7, and you can only use it for a few days at a time, so every minute is precious. I went with a team of 5 people, and we worked all day and all night in shifts. At the end of my first shift, I was sat outside drinking a Coke and sunning my pasty white legs in the last few hours of sunlight.
Can you believe that, son?
I could look at it all day.
And as I relaxed, I heard it. It was a noise that was completely foreign to me. It was a bit more than this, but slightly less than this. Whatever made that noise fired past me like a bullet and scared the hell out of me. But as I looked for the source of the noise and eventually caught sight of it, I was amazed I'd finally seen one in the wild. The smallest dinosaur currently known to science. When I say that, you might be confused. Didn't dinosaurs get hit by an asteroid and all die out? That's a common misconception. From as far back as the 19th century, scientists have thought that dinosaurs and birds were related. In 1860, a remarkable discovery was made in the Jurassic rocks of southern Germany. It's a bizarre skeleton that shared traits of both dinosaurs and birds. Because of the amazing preservation, it was clear that Archaeopteryx was covered in feathers, and scientists believe it could probably fly, although not for as long or as gracefully as modern birds. It still has dinosaur features like sharp teeth, and its skeleton looked like a dinosaur such as Compsognathus, but for a long time it was considered the earliest known bird. Discoveries in the 1960s of famous raptors like Deinonychus have helped usher in the famous dinosaur renaissance, and many paleontologists have identified skeletal similarities between these dinosaurs and modern birds. Then, in 1996, a dinosaur skeleton was discovered in China called Sinosauropteryx, and this was the first definitely not avian dinosaur which had feathers. But since then, dozens of other species of feathered dinosaurs have been discovered, confirming that birds are in fact dinosaurs. I bet you'll never look at pigeons in the same way again. Because of these discoveries, scientists now have a good understanding of the evolution of feathers. I'll let science writer Carl Zimmer explain.
The most distant feathered relatives of birds had straight feathers that looked like wires. Then these wires split apart, producing simple branches. In many dinosaur lineages, these simple feathers evolved into more intricate ones, including some that we see today on birds.
We've been able to use powerful microscopes to analyse these feathers and identify the pigments inside them. Did you know that dinosaurs were the first extinct animals where scientists used physical evidence to work out what colour they were when they were alive? Whew. Well, now we've got that out of the way, we can talk about the smallest dinosaur. Some of you may be thinking, what about the little two-legged thing that ate the girl at the beginning of Jurassic Park 2?
What are you? Little bird or something?
Well, Compsognathus is really small, but it wasn't the smallest. Nope. The smallest dinosaur alive is alive today, and you may have seen one in real life, or maybe on TV. The smallest dinosaurs are the hummingbirds. Did you know that the smallest hummingbird is the bee hummingbird? And they're 6 centimeters long and they weigh 2.6 grams. For comparison, a British 2p coin weighs 7 grams. Hummingbirds are amazingly beautiful animals and they are mind-blowing creatures. They have a massive brain for their size and they're incredibly quick and agile. Did you know that they're the only birds that can fly upside down and backwards? Hummingbirds are also famous for being able to hover by flapping their wings extremely quickly. In some species, they flap over 80 times a second. Because of this, they have the highest metabolic rate of any vertebrate, and their heart rate can reach as high as 1,260 beats per minute, with a breathing rate of 250 breaths per minute, even when they are resting. They drink nectar from flowers using crazy forked tongues, which are perfectly adapted to scoop every milligram of pollen out of a flower. And to conserve energy at night, or when they can't find food, they go into a type of torpor, which is basically like a mini hibernation. And then you get famous viral videos of them snoring adorably. But despite their insane lifestyles, hummingbirds live for quite a long time for birds. Their average lifespan is about 3 to 5 years.
We interrupt this program for an important news announcement.
When I was writing the script for this video essay, a tiny dinosaur skull in Burmese amber was described in the journal Nature. Called oculodentavis, it is claimed that this animal is a tiny dinosaur, reportedly the size of a hummingbird. Unfortunately, this is a controversial fossil. The fossil was found in the conflict-ridden Kachin state of Myanmar, where rival factions use the amber as a commodity to raise money to fuel the conflict. And it's controversial because although it was described as a dinosaur, some paleontologists already believe that this is actually the skull of a lizard. So for now, the hummingbird is still the smallest dinosaur. As I was saying, hummingbirds are one of my favourite animals. If you live in the same area as hummingbirds, they are quite common, but for me it was like seeing a giant squid. As I sat and watched, I noticed there were quite a few buzzing around. For the rest of the trip, I kept my eyes out. Then, one day after my shift, I decided to head out for a stroll. The facility is basically on the edge of the countryside, and as the sun was setting, I decided to walk to a nearby ridge. There were many amazing birds and snakes, insects, deers and hares, which as a European I'm just not used to seeing, so it's a real treat to walk around there. As I walked along the path, I noticed lots of activity near some purple flowers. It was starting to get dark, but I was convinced that I heard some hummingbirds fly past me. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to go back for the rest of that trip.
Much later.
But 1 year later, I was back in California and determined to see the hummingbirds and catch one on film. Because I had to pack for a lengthy research trip, I only had the most basic of camera setups and a tiny little gorilla pod, so I knew capturing such a speedy animal on film was going to be really difficult. I woke up at 5 AM on the first day and headed out to the ridge. It was pretty eerie walking through the facility in the dark, and it was even more creepy when I passed through the perimeter fence and was met by howling. I had no idea what the beasts were that were making the noise, but I'm guessing that they were coyotes. Either way, I didn't really want to be eaten alive just looking for hummingbirds, so I waited for the house to die down. Eventually, I made it to the ridge and waited for the sun to rise. As you can see from my award-winning footage of this hare, my hands really tremble, and it's hard to get stable video footage, let alone of hummingbirds flying around at the speed of bumblebees. The only stable surface I could find was the path itself, so I lay down with my camera set up on the gorilla pod and waited, and waited, and waited some more. Then, suddenly all around me, hummingbirds started to emerge. They were whizzing by, and it was impossible for me to capture. So I sat patiently. I know that some male hummingbirds are very territorial, and they'll often chase other hummingbirds off their patch. In order to keep an eye out for intruders and for predators, they'll often choose a high tree or branch to sit on. And my hunch was right, because after a little while I noticed one hummingbird consistently returning to a branch. So I moved my camera and I waited patiently. Eventually I managed to get the shots of the hummingbird chilling, which was something I had been waiting for and planned for so long. It was over a year of waiting. a hummingbird expert, but I think this is the species called Anna's hummingbird, which is a very common species in California. I managed to get some shots of them flying around, and preening themselves, singing away, but what I wanted more than anything else was to get a shot of the birds feeding. From a technical standpoint, this was probably the most challenging shot with my limited equipment, but over the course of 4 mornings, I basically saw that hummingbirds were returning to the same bush over and over again. So on one of the mornings I set my camera up, and then I managed to capture a hummingbird feeding. I was so proud of myself. I had finally filmed the smallest dinosaur eating. Thank you for watching. I'm going to be making more video essays about paleontology and the natural world over the next couple of weeks. Next week's video is going to be all about a creature that builds its own sandcastles on the beach and lives in them. So subscribe to my channel if you don't want to miss that one, and thank you very much for watching.